Okay, so it's time to recap what you have learned, and the way I'm going to do the recap is to show you how you can activate all what you have learned in order to make Switzerland 100% renewable. So it means that I'm going to make a list or identify the list of all what you have learned and show how those elements can be activated to make a country 100% renewable. So the first thing that we have to remind is that the sun is the source of energy that we have since a lot of time, and that Mother Nature has understood the first problem, which was the storage of energy, and the fact that energy is not only needs to be available, but needs to be used and distributed so that it can be used at a time where we need it. And thanks to the photosynthesis, the men do receive the amount of energy that they do need to operate their body, which will appear here in this picture with a circle of 10, which corresponds to the amount around 100 liters of oil equivalent a year just to operate our body. Nature has stored part of this biomass 300 million years ago in form of biomass that has been stored on the ground, that has been processed by the earth, and has created some reserve. The reserves corresponds to 10% of 1 year of solar irradiation that is stored in form of oil, coal and gas, which also means that one of the elements here is the carbon. The carbon that is the old one, so it has 300 million year, that man did discover, extract, transport, distribute, convert to satisfy all our needs. So, and our needs are for mobility, for living, and for the industry. And the numbers that are here are expressed as multipliers of the 10, which and they are representative for the whole world. Okay. Something which is interesting here is that we do not only need energy for our purposes, but also for our products, which means that we need the carbon is not only a source of energy, but it's also a source of materials. The flows that are represented here shows that only a small part is directly coming from the renewable energy sources, so 30 units. A small amount as well from nuclear power plants here, but the most of the energy needs is coming from the fossil fuel, and which has a consequence that we emit carbon dioxide. And the increase of the concentration of carbon dioxide has shown that there has been an increase in the mean temperature of the Earth. So already since we are living we have already increased by 1 degree C, and if we continue, it will be even bigger. So there are some funny consequences, like that the people from UK are going to produce wine, and it's not a joke, right? But there are also more difficult consequences. So the one that are related to floods, and slower hurricanes. So it's also important that the hurricanes are traveling slowly and slowly than before, which means that they spend more time on the ground, and so they destroy more. We have heat waves. So there was one that was quite important this summer in Europe. But the heat waves have also another consequence, is that there are some parts of in the Earth where the human body will not be able to cool down anymore. So the transpiration due to the humidity and due to the temperature difference will not be possible anymore, which means that the populations and the animals that will be in those zones will have a big trend to move, otherwise they would have to wear scaphandra just to live outside, otherwise they would die. Okay, and so those are the zones in near the Mediterranean Sea in Africa. Okay, and a part in as well some zones in the US and in China. So in China, the population concerned is 400 million people, so it's the same size as the population of the US. That will be forced by the climate change to move. Okay, and I let you imagine what would be the consequences for the geopolitical consequences. The International Panel on Climate Change has been studying what is needed in terms of carbon dioxide emission allowance to reach the target, and this year there has been an update of the report that is showing that we have already consumed, we have already emitted 80% of the carbon dioxide that we were allowed to extract from the old carbon that was in the reserve. So it means that we still have 20% of our capacity of extracting oil, gas and coal from the earth. Otherwise, we will have a problem of the temperature increase. So the question is, now, can we make a country 100% renewable? So can we cut the carbon dioxide emissions to zero without obviously importing fossil resources, which is the consequence, and of course without losing money. So in order to do this, then what we do is that we have to look at, to understand where we consume the energy, 50% in the buildings, 36% for the mobility, and 20% in Switzerland for the industry, including 2% of carbon that is used as product. Something which is important here is that in the major part of the 47% here, most of the demand is for heating purposes. So the red part is the heating, which is unfortunately not when the sun is shining. Okay, so it means that even we know that we have a very big resource, which is the sun, we have to make a coordination. So for doing this, then you have learned that it was important to understand the full conversion chain, starting from the people that have a need and going to the energy resources that we have to that we will need to harvest. Something which is important here is that, so it's a list of conversion, and each time you lose an efficiency, it's a product. Huh? So it means that it's a multiplication factor here. The first two elements are the ones that are very difficult to manage because the population is going to grow and the people will need more and more comfort or standard of living, which has a consequence that they will ask for more energy, even if we are more efficient in supplying this. So, for example, in the building stock, will have to increase because there will be more people in Switzerland. The people in Switzerland will ask more square meters to live than in the past. And even if you have very nice new buildings for compensating the increase, you will have to renovate buildings. But if you do not reach 2% of renovation rate, the demand will remain constant, okay? Because we have to take into account the increase of the population. So from this analysis, then what is important is to supply this energy in the most efficient way. And you have seen that the thermodynamics is going to tell us how to do it. So Carnot has shown that to supply 10 units of heat, you can do it by buying 1 unit of energy in form of work. The rest, so the 9 units, have to be taken from the environment, which means that this ratio here, which is the ratio between the source and the supply, defines the amount of the resource that can come directly from the exchange with the environment. Okay, and you have learned this, so it means that you cannot ignore it anymore, right? So then we have to ask ourselves, why, instead of buying 1 unit to supply 10 units of heat, we buy 11 in a very nice heating system that has a 90% energy efficiency, which is the one that you obtain by burning, and you have seen the combustion, burning natural gas in a boiler to supply heat that is with a mean temperature of 1000 degrees C, supplied at 21 degrees C to heat the people, and in this case is based on fossil resources. So we have to ask ourselves why, instead of consuming 1, we consume 11. Okay? And the answer is the heat pumping. So you have seen heat pumps in the course, and the heat pump is allowing to take heat at the right place in the environment. The higher the temperature, the better it is, to supply the heat where it is needed, and the lower the temperature at which the heat is needed, the better it is. Okay? So heat pumps cannot do the 100% efficiency of the thermodynamics, because the thermodynamics was telling us that it was reversible processes, right? And here we cannot have the time to wait for the reversible processes to occur. So it means that we have to accept some inefficiency in terms of energy losses. But what is known is that the technologies of today can do half of the best efficiency. Okay, when we look at this system here, what is important is to harvest the heat at the right place and supply it at the right place. So it means that it would be nice to have someone who has a low temperature heating system in a building be favorized with respect to someone who would be heated with very high temperature because he has very small radiators. Okay, so it would be fair to do it. And on the other hand, it would be also very nice not to heat at not to harvest the heat in the environment at 0 degrees C if there is a place where I have waste heat available. And for this reason, it would be better to cut the heat pump into 2 parts. On the one hand, a heat pump that would harvest the heat, and on another one, the heat pump that would supply the heat. And it means that you would have to transport the heat from the first step to the first heat pump level to the second part of the heat pump. And this can be done by using carbon dioxide. And this is one of the ideas that EPFL has been patenting. It's the carbon dioxide in a pipe used to transfer heat in cities. So the idea would be to have 2 pipes, a gas pipe and a liquid pipe. When I need heat, I take the gas and I condense it. So I take the heat in the gas, and by condensation I recover the heat of condensation. And I'm going to use a heat pump to raise the temperature to the temperature that I need. And this can be for producing hot water or supplying heat to the system. So what is the beauty of this is that when I have a data center, and this is typically what is happening in the city centers. So there are people that needs to be cooled down at the same time as people that needs to be heated. So now I can cool a data center by taking the liquid and evaporating it. But then it means that I will be able to recover this heat to supply the heat needs. So I have a heat pump that is harvesting the heat at the right place. Okay? When I have heat that is available at higher temperature, what you have seen is that if you have heat available at a certain temperature, what you can do is a Rankine cycle. So we have learned how to do Rankine cycles, steam cycle, or organic Rankine cycles that can then use the waste heat, so for example the heat of the municipal waste, to produce electricity and to evaporate carbon dioxide that is sent into the pipe in a gas form so that it can be afterwards reused by another user. And of course, I have to make a balance. And I have another opportunity as well, is that I have a system that allows me to do cooling. Okay? Because I can evaporate the liquid to produce the gas, and it means that I can also supply all the cooling needs that I have in the city. Refrigeration, storing food. Okay? This can be done by this system. And afterwards, I'm going to balance, at the right place with heat pumps to harvest the heat from the environment, being the heat from the wastewater. It is at 17 degrees C, so I can use it. The heat of the lakes, the heat of the rivers, or the heat from the ground. And you have seen that the ground is a good resource. Something which is also quite interesting in this approach is that when I have waste heat from waste incineration, I have this waste heat available 100% of the time, okay? And unfortunately, I'm not going to heat 100% of the time, okay? So what I can do is to produce from the heat, to produce electricity and send the electricity to the grid. I will have waste heat still available, distributed in the CO2 network. Okay, but I will not use it in the summer period because I have no need for the heat. Okay, so I have to look at what is happening in the summer, in the winter. So in the winter, I'm going to take in the summer, I'm going to produce electricity, and you have seen that there was ways to store the electricity in form of chemicals with a certain efficiency, so I had a little bit less. Which means that I have this amount of electricity that is available for heat pumping. So I will take this electricity to pump the waste heat of my waste incineration plant. But you can see that this is far from a normal coefficient of performance of a heat pump, so which means that I will be able to harvest heat in the environment in addition to the waste heat recovery, okay, with this amount of electricity. So if I'm looking at the sun, I can supply 2.6 times more heat for the same amount of heat that is produced in the waste incineration plant. Okay? Just because I'm applying the principle of thermodynamics. Principle of producing electricity to harvest the exergy of a heat source, and principle of thermodynamics because I can always use a heat pump to reach the temperature that is needed to supply the heat. It means that now I can look at different sources, being the waste incineration that I can use to produce the heat. And in this case, what you can see is that you can have 2.6%. If the temperature is lower, then I will produce less electricity, which means that the multiplication factor will be lower. But even polymers, plastics that we consume every day, is a process that is exothermic and that is producing heat by nature. Okay, it's written in the chemical formula that produces polymers. So the synthesis reactions are exothermic. And the fact that it is exothermic allows me to recover the heat. I can convert this heat into electricity and use the electricity to drive heat pumps in the winter period when I need heat. Okay? Another interesting element from the carbon dioxide is that the carbon dioxide is not going to freeze if the temperature is below zero, which means that you do not have to put the pipes very deep in the ground. So when you have water, you have to go 1 meter deep or 80 centimeter deep. With the CO2 pipes, you can still be just near the surface. Okay, and as you use the heat of vaporization and condensation, the pumps are much smaller for the same amount of heat to be transported, so that you can create pedestrian walks that can be prefabricated and that will be used to feed the city. The fact that you can then renovate the city, making very nice pedestrian walks for the citizens is also an advantage for the politicians, because then they can make the city better. So now I have a system that is combining heat pumping and Rankine cycles. We have shown in the city center of Geneva that by using the carbon dioxide network, we were able to go to divide by a factor 6 the energy consumption of the city center. So it means that I was starting from a 100 and now I'm at 18 to supply the same comfort to all the people that are living there. Okay? The payback time was 6 years. So in 6 years, the money that you have invested is reimbursed. Okay? And there is no more boilers in the system. Yeah?
Did you actually do this, or was it a study?
It's a study, but with the Industrial Services of Geneva, and we are going to make a demonstration of in the city center. But just to show you what is the beauty of it is that now the overall amount of energy that needs to be satisfied, this needs to be supplied, is in form of electricity. Okay? Yeah?
The payback is in like economically wise or emission wise?
No, it's economically.
And did you make an analysis of like all the construction of this enormous district?
Yeah, it was the overall investment, including buying heat pumps in each of the buildings, including buying the heat pump for the heat harvesting, okay, and the pipes that needs to be installed in the city.
What I'm asking is, did you calculate the payback for the emissions that all this construction will?
No, there was. It was not with the life cycle approach. If this is the question. Because this is an economical payback here, okay? So, but it means also that when I'm buying something, I'm supposed to pay for the emissions indirectly, okay? So this system is going to use electricity, and the idea is, of course, to use the electricity that we have on the roof, okay? You have seen that the PV panels are becoming cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So it becomes quite straightforward that we have to use the surface of the buildings that we have in order to produce the electricity that we need. Of course, there is a difficulty there that I have to coordinate the presence of the sun and the needs of the people. And this will be done by using the big data and to make predictions. So you have seen that predictions were something that was important in such a way that you will maximize the self-consumption of the electricity. The trick of this is that you will be in a situation where you will use at maximum the amount of electricity that you have on the roofs, but there will be at a certain time of the year too much electricity and certain time of the year not enough. Okay, so it means that now I have to look at the balance, and the balance is showing that 2/3 of the electricity that is produced that is needed in the city, including the electrical needs, can be satisfied directly by coordination of the PV that is on the roofs. Okay, so now I still have one question then, but I was coming from 100 and I'm 6%, okay? So 100, I'm at 6. That needs to be still satisfied. So how do we do this? So you have seen that we can produce electricity with conventional power plants, okay? With a lot of carbon dioxide emissions. You can do it with combined cycle, and then you know that in this case you are going to use gas and you will be more efficient, around 60% of efficiency. And you can also use cogeneration. So this is another principle that you have seen. Now, the advantage is that the cogeneration is going to use the waste heat, and the electricity will be used to drive heat pumps. Okay, so now if I'm looking at how much in my system a unit of gas is, what is the heat that is supplied per unit of gas that is consumed, if you use a fuel cell with a cogeneration unit, you can, in the CO2 network, you can see that the 1 unit of gas is supplying 4 units of heat. So I'm much better than the initial solution, and it is only for the 6 remaining %. The rest of the time, it is already supplied by the PV panel. Now I have to ask myself, how do I produce this gas? Because if it is for using fossil natural gas, it would not be the best idea. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use biomethane. So you have seen that the biomass, which is the organic waste that the people produce, can be in form of produced by biomethanization, but also by hydrothermal gasification or synthetic natural gas production. Most of those operations produce heat at the same time as they produce synthetic natural gas, so it means that I will be able to recover this heat in my district heating system, so I will be even more efficient. And another characteristic is that I'm going to capture carbon dioxide, because the carbon dioxide is the byproduct of the conversion. So I can capture it in a concentrated way. So what is the next step? The next step is, or the other possibility is to use CO2 capture. And you have seen a list of techniques to do CO2 capture. You can capture CO2 from combined cycles, but in this case you will have to pay a certain amount of penalty in the energy efficiency to it. Okay, so it means that if you were here with a combined cycle, you will be here. So there is a penalty related to the capture in the combined cycle. Or you can use fuel cells that, and in particular the solid oxide fuel cells that are going to separate the carbon dioxide at the time where they produce electricity. Efficiency can be as high as 80%. And still 20% of the heat can be recovered, which means that it's 100% efficient system in terms of energy point of view. And of course, the amount that is here can be used to drive heat pumps, which means that if I'm using it inside the system, then I will be even more efficient at the level of the amount of heat supplied per unit of biogas used in my system. So now I will have a very nice system that is going to use to supply all the needs, harvest the heat where the heat is available, and balance with the environment by using the PV panels that are on the roofs and using the biogas that is going to produce the electricity that is needed when there is no need for when the PV are not available. And the consequence of it is that I will sequestrate carbon dioxide. So it means that in this case, the city is becoming negative in carbon dioxide emissions if someone is available for sequestrating the carbon dioxide. Okay, so I still have an opportunity here. It's the excess of PV because I have used I have solved my energy balance, but I have too much electricity in the summer. So what can I do? I can mimic nature. So nature, when nature had too much energy, it was converting it into chemicals, the food that you eat every day. We can do the same with a technical system that is going to take the excess of electricity that is produced by the PV panels, use the carbon dioxide that I have in my pipes, and to produce methane. So this is the principle that you have seen of the electrolysis. Okay, I'm storing methane, so it means that in the summer I'm going to take the excess of the PV panels to produce liquid methane based on the carbon dioxide that I would have in the liquid form. And in the winter, I'm going to take this liquid methane, I'm going to distribute it in pipes, send it to cogeneration unit with fuel cells that is going to send me back the carbon dioxide, and at the same time is going to supply electricity for my heat pump systems. So now I have a fully integrated system that allows me then to show that a city, if the city of Geneva was using the overall amount of roof that they have, they could become a net exporter of methane. Okay, and the city is 100% fed by the resources. So it means that now I do not have any more carbon dioxide emissions. I have to invest. So the estimated investment is corresponds to 8 Swiss francs per day and per inhabitant. Okay, which gives an indication of how much we have to invest. But as soon as we invest, we make money out of the fact that the people will pay for the services. I'm using the resources that I have on the roof, I'm using my waste, including the waste incineration, and I'm getting the energy from the environment. So the order of magnitude is 25 square meters of PV panels per inhabitant. Okay? And the other dimension, which is quite interesting, is that the more efficient I am, the less, 1 minute.
Cost per day per inhabitant?
Yeah.
Like for operational costs or just investment?
And that's interesting because, in fact, what we name the operational cost is a constant flow that we have to buy. And in the case of this city, the constant flow that we are using is coming for free because it's the sun. The rest is build the system and operate it. Of course, there will be some people that needs to operate it, but nevertheless, so everything is an investment.
So, but
Indeed.
for how much time, if you talk per day, for how much time will it take till the system is implemented?
So it means, so the way we have calculated this value here, so the Swiss franc per day and per capita, it corresponds to an investment that is annualized. So it's how much we have to pay every day for the lifetime of the equipment that we have considered. Okay, and the expected interest rate that the people hope to have from the system. So the other dimension is that the more the system is efficient, the less PV panels we have to buy, and the consequence is that the cost is decreasing. Okay, so it means that the energy system has a cost that is decreasing when it is more efficient, which is quite, that can be quite surprising. And I'm showing here the difference between a conventional system and a system where I'm doing renovation, that I'm using geothermal heat storage, and I'm using a solid oxide fuel cell that is fed by an advanced solid oxide fuel cells and advanced PV panels, which are hybrid, so they produce heat and electricity at the same time. Okay, so now I have a system that is 100% defined, and the beauty of it is that now I'm 100% fed by the energy flow that I'm receiving on my roofs. Okay, so it means that the whole amount of money is in fact used to buy equipments, which means produce jobs, local jobs. Okay, which is also quite important. But I have solved only half of the problem. Okay, I still need to solve the problem of mobility and industry. And I'm going first to look at the industry. So typically the industry is using energy to make products. And I must admit that at the same time, they do also produce the fuels that is needed for the transportation. In the industry, we have to be efficient. So do heat recovery, integrate heat pumping, and by doing this, you can already divide by a factor 2 the amount of energy that the industry needs. In addition, if you try to force the industry to share with the other, so for example, use the heat of a cement plant to operate a food production dairy, for example, then you will be even more efficient. Okay? Still, this system will need heat, much lower amounts, but will need heat. And the possibility that we have is to use biomass, because I have not used the wood that was harvested outside the city up to now. Okay, so now if I'm taking this wood and if I'm converting it into fuel, I have heat available. Okay, and this heat can be used to feed the needs of the processes. And the remaining heat can be used to heat cities, because cities are at very low temperature. And in fact, I can even cool down the processes of the industry by heating the cities, right? So as soon as I have a way to transport the heat, then I can always recover the heat from one place to another, and which would make the system very interesting. In addition, the byproduct of the biomass conversion, you know it, by the fact that there is an oxygen in the carbon hydrate that is here, the system is going to produce carbon dioxide. And what I know is that either I can sequestrate the carbon dioxide that is extracted there, or I can use it to store electricity if there is an excess of electricity on the grid, to produce hydrogen that can then increase the production of methane in the system. So now I have a system that has to be a little bit more smart, because I will do this when the electricity is in excess. So I have to understand the whole system to see when I have electricity that is in excess. Otherwise, I can use directly the electricity. And I will have to decide if I need this carbon dioxide or not. So I have two options: sequestrate it, store it, or directly use it when there is an excess. So three options that leads to three different solutions. In addition, I need to produce the products, because I don't want to use fossil fuel. And if I do not want to use fossil fuel anymore, it means that I will not have the waste of the fossil fuel production, which is the carbon that is used to produce plastics. all the hydrocarbon materials. So it means that I will have also to look at biomass as a source of carbon. So it means that I will have situations like this where I will use the biomass to make products and at the same time to produce synthetic fuels and distribute the heat to the rest of the city, of the system, sorry. Looking at the integration of the whole industry, then we see that we are entering into the circular economy principle. So not only looking at the transforming biomass into products, but also recycling carbon products in a much better or smarter way than it is done today. Okay? So it means that now I will integrate the industrial system with the city, sharing heat, sharing waste, and making products. And the byproduct of it will be the fuel, and the fuel, of course, I'm going to jump directly to the mobility, because I have energy available in terms of fuel and in terms of electricity, which means that if I want to close the energy balance of the mobility, I will have to increase the efficiency of the mobility. And increasing the efficiency of the mobility means using electricity. For two reasons. The first one is that as soon as you brake, instead of sending the heat to the environment by evacuating your kinetic energy, you can convert it into electricity if you store it in a battery. Okay? And in addition, the internal combustion engines in cars are quite inefficient because they are used for varying power. Okay, so it means that you never use the nominal power of the engine that you have in your car. So at the end, if you electrify, you will need electricity for most of the conventional use of cars. So remember that a car is 92% of the time in a parking lot and only 8% of the time on the road, which means that there is a lot of time to recharge a battery. Okay, so it means that most of the commuting distances can be done by purely electrical cars. Okay, if you need a longer autonomy, so longer distance, like in trucks, then you can use biofuels that you will convert into electricity with fuel cells, for example, that will produce the electricity that you need. And what you will do is that you will use the battery to play with the power. Okay, so the fuel cell supplies the energy, the battery supplies the power. Now, with this, I can reduce the demand of the mobility by a factor 3, let's say. That's what I have done here, and you see that I have much of the energy available being in form of biofuel or being in form of electricity from the hydro dams and the wind. Okay, I have already explained the principle of the range extender here, which means that at the end I can have a system that is 100% renewable, and we can make the calculation and prove that we can be 100% renewable. We can even decide to export because we have too much energy on all our roofs. Or, of course, what we can do is to buy less PV panels on the roof so that we are just balanced. It is our decision. And something which is also interesting is that if I do not know what to do with the carbon dioxide, I can even sequestrate it by making it react with minerals that are not fully oxidized, so they can give you some oxygen. And this is the case for the serpentine, for example, that can produce mineral carbon that can then be sequestrated in a safe way. And the operation is exothermic, so if you integrate it with the cities, you will recover even the heat of this sequestration. Okay, it's a small amount, so if you go from the methane to the CO2, you have 74. If you go to 0, then you still have 4. So it's a very small amount, but nevertheless it can be recovered, okay, in the system. So this allows me then to show the complete vision of a country that can be 100% autonomous, you have learned everything that is needed for calculating those systems. You have learned the heat pumps, you have learned the turbines, you have learned the power-to-gas concepts, the way to convert biomass, you have learned how to store the energy in different forms. You have learned how to convert the sun into, with the PV panels, with the wind or the hydro plants. So you know everything. So now your mission, and you will be the responsible for this mission in the 30 coming years, not hours, years, is to convince the authorities that this makes sense, to teach the people that this makes sense, to implement it in the industry, the solutions, okay? And even to convince the bankers that they have to give you money to do this 100% renewable country, okay? And this is perhaps the most important part, is that today banks invest in harvesting fossil fuel. So we have to convince them that they have to stop giving the money for something which is creating a burden to our children, and use this money for satisfying our needs. And I can tell you that it's not a lot, and it creates jobs here and not in the Putin government or for the Arabic countries. Okay? So with this, I'm sure that this one will be also happy. And now you will have for the course the mission of trying to see how we can reach this 100% renewable country. I'm sure that there are more than one option, and this is also a beauty of this, is that we have there will be competition. So smart engineers will win, but they will compete one with the other. Okay? And I will conclude by first thanking Stefano, because he has spent a lot of time to prepare this course. So he deserves for sure an applause for the time he has spent. Yeah, you can applaud. As well as the assistant, because they are there to still help you. So two missions remains to be done for you, is preparing the exam and preparing the report, okay? But what you can see is very important to understand the energy systems, so that we, at the end, will be able to solve the problems. So by this, thank you.